Hey, everybody. Welcome to the first day of December. I'm Jason. This is Life in Tech 148.
The bad guy.
And I'm still TK.
With that scuffed Johnny Depp pirate mustache.
No, it's more about Doc Holliday. I was watching Tombstone.
Johnny Ringo.
I'll be your Huckleberry.
How you doing, TK?
I'm doing well, thank you. I just want to let you guys get your facial hair fashion tips out of the way for the week.
Hey, I got my hair cut yesterday. Nice and clean.
Looks fresh, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Ready to hit the new month, the end of the school semester?
That's right, man. I got full classes Monday, Tuesday, reading day Wednesday, then into finals. 3 finals, and I'm done.
How about that?
Mm-hmm.
Semester number 1 at High Point in the books.
Yeah, that's right.
That's awesome,
We'll
though,
see.
man.
Yeah, I've had a great time. You know, It's been stressful. Anytime I think we talked about this a little bit, and we will get to tipping universal basic income, I swear to God. Anytime you're the new guy, and then on top of that, you have to build these courses. And so even if you have courses, you still got to tailor them to the new place. It's a lot of overhead. It's a lot of administrative overhead on top of, man, there's one other new guy in the department, and we're almost in identical situations. He came from a really small private school, so that didn't treat him well. Similar backgrounds, roughly the same amount of years of teaching. And we both say, boy, are we glad we also don't have the learning curve of how do I even teach in a university? Because there's, you come right out of grad school. In grad school, they don't teach you how to teach. There's no class. You just, maybe you TA along the way, maybe you adjunct somewhere and you kind of figure it out, but there's no training. You know what I mean? It's not like doing an education undergrad and then going and being in K through 12. There's nothing. And so could you imagine coming right out of grad school and you're like, dude, I want to be a professor. And you come in and you're in an environment like this that's really heavy hands-on with students. It's intense. And you don't even know how to teach. And you're like, dude, I don't know if I did the right thing.
I like the fact that you say High Point's really high touch with the students. I mean, when do we lose that, right? I mean, and you look at probably really massive public universities have a much larger challenge with that, right? Because just you look at the UMass campus in Amherst, probably 30,000 plus people.
Yeah.
It's really horizontally spread a campus. It's not a vertical campus. So how does that, how do you keep in touch with all your students? Especially like at freshman, sophomore year when you're doing some of these 100 level classes that have 500 people in them just because they're trying to warehouse you through the basic information.
Right. Well, I had a class at Cal Poly when I taught there that I think was 150. It's scaled pretty big. And so kids at High Point, because, the biggest classrooms are built to only hold, let's say max 60, 70 people. And then it's a fire code violation, right? And so that's the cap of the building. And so that's the brand new buildings too. So they definitely have an idea of how big they want to be. Anyway, right. And so the kids will ask me, well, what's it like? I mean, maybe I get to know the front row of people. Maybe.
Right. Or if some student stands out in his homework and is what he has to submit to you, you go figure out who he is because you're like, hey, either this dude's really got it going on or we got to talk about Barber College, the other dude, right?
Right.
Well, do they break it down then lecture versus lab to where then, your 60-person class is broken into 2 different lab classes? No? Just straight lecture?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that class didn't have a lab, so it just didn't have it. That was basically, I was teaching in the business school. And so every major in that school had to take this class. It was a choke point for all the majors. And that's why it was that large. But, one of the things I like about High Point, and here's our segue. This took me a little bit to figure out if I was going to like it or not. So there's several times a semester where it's called Parents' Day or Parents' Weekend. They come on campus. They can. And they schedule appointments and the parents of students come and talk to you. It's like parent-teacher conference. And at first I was like, what, man? This is undergrad. What are you doing? And then I'm like, hey, wait a minute. No, this is actually a good opportunity because if there's something they want to give me feedback on, they can come give it to me instead of going to the department chair or the college dean or, God forbid, the president. So
or,
you can
or
kind of
Twitter,
or
or social media.
Yeah. And so you can kind of build these relationships, and it makes up for a much stronger community once I wrapped my mind around it. But on the other hand, you got to deal with parents, which isn't always comfortable, depending on how well their student is doing.
I was on Twitter the other day, and one of the recruiting services for high school to college sports had a Twitter question, right? Twitter poll rather, and it was, what is the single biggest delimiter for really talented athletes not getting college scholarships? And it was grades, two other things, and at the bottom it was adverse behavior of parents. And adverse behavior of parents had like 3%, and grades had like 80%. When actually it was flipped, it was the other way around. And so I think, one of my friends, his older daughter plays basketball at the Naval Academy, and so they went up there. They had a game on Wednesday against Air Force, and so they went up there to watch their daughter play. And, the school is really into knowing the parents. Right now, Naval Academy is a little bit different, but the athletic department, I think in a lot of these schools, there's such a big tie-in with how kids get to a certain place. And we look at it in things where it shines, right? Or sports because it's on television. But how many parents really are sacrificing to get their children to the education they want or they think they should have, and doing things that may materially change their life so their children can have a much better life. Right? Yeah. And so, I mean, some of it, you always get the helicopter mom type thing, but I think those things kind of they kind of wash themselves out,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I thought back to when I was an undergrad, dude. My parents dropped me off and they never came back, ever, ever. And so I think back to, I'm like, hey, oh, yeah, sure it was. But
that's because you had recently shaved your mustache and they were unhappy.
Like I think back and I'm like, maybe that wasn't such a good thing. I don't know. But anyway, here's the segue. So check this out. Part of the academic regalia is the hood, the colored part that goes around your neck and it goes down the back, right? And so at the end of that, it has like a long cloth, let's call it a spittoon, okay? It's like a glove flipped inside out. And that was meant for people to put your alms in when you were walking around. So that's how you got paid, right? And so I've often thought, man, if I'm in here kicking ass and you're giving me, 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5 star reviews, why aren't you tipping me? Right? I mean, it's a service-oriented profession by definition in my mind. And so then I started thinking about, here's your segue. It's a little rough, but here we go. So then I was thinking, well, I'm kind of fortunate being in computer science. I don't get paid poorly, okay? Other, like humanities, they ain't getting paid, man. I mean, it's pretty bad. The salaries, you're talking like 35, 40K a year as a doctorate, right? I mean, and you're talking, you have tenure, you're not new to the game. They're struggling in a lot of places. And so I was thinking, well, how does this concept of universal basic income, no minimum wage, affect academics? And then what does it do to tipping culture in the US? Since we're largely driven to tip, especially in service-oriented industries. So that's what I wanted to talk about. There you go. There's your segue.
That was a bit
Dan,
rocky,
what do you think?
In terms of tipping?
Yeah, let's start there.
I have no issues with with tipping. I find it. I mean, what I think is challenging is if you are at a particular, but it all comes back down to what the value is. If you're going to a Denny's, I can't imagine that the service folks there, the waitresses and waiters, are making a whole lot of money. So at their whatever it is, $2.15 an hour plus tip, probably they're not doing very well. Whereas if you go to fine dining, where the average bill size is probably $250, so we're waiting on 6 or 7 tables an hour. Their $2.15 doesn't matter because they're making $50 per table, so they just made $200 in that 1 hour shift because they're doing 4 or 5 tables. So if you are a great waiter, waitress, you're going to be you're looking to be at a more upscale establishment. I think if you are striving to be excellent in your profession, because I can tell you there's a lot of places I go simply for the fact of the service. That waiter, waitress, bartender is so amazing that's why I go out. Because I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty good cook, so I can cook at home. I go out because I want the service, and I'm going for that more fine dining, and I have no problem tipping that person on my, $200 bill, $40-$50. They're at the top of their, game. Therefore, they're not making minimum wage. They're making $40 an hour for their, for that shift that they're on. So if they're working a 6-hour shift, a dinner shift, they're not bringing in 20 grand. They're bringing in closer to that $75,000-$80,000 a year.
I think, and I think when we started saying that we were going to stick to this topic, it started out with minimum wage, right? Mm-hmm. And I think if you try to say I think what we're in the business of doing in kind of this cancel culture, everything's either all bad or all good, is we mute discussion that in large measure that doesn't fit a point, right? And one of the big things about the minimum wage is, and getting it to $15 an hour in this case that we're trying to do now, is we're saying that those entry-level jobs that largely were meant to be a training ground for young employees, right? And I'll tell you, go clean toilets, go work in an amusement park and sweep up trash all day. It'll keep you in school, right? Or in the case, and like fast food places, they amaze me, right? That you get somebody in there, a kid in high school, and it's literally, there's a pyramid, right? There's going to be one of those young folks that is going to end up being the manager. Mm-hmm. Right? That's, in the case of McDonald's, and I don't know how it is today, but back in the old days, they put them through their version of Hamburger U and give them some basic business training and like that. And then they, a lot of those folks have ended up over the years becoming franchisees. All right. And if you look, I think In-N-Out Burger has like an unbelievable management training program, but it all starts with somebody walking in and saying, "Hey, would you like fries with that?" All right. And we tend to take those minimum wage jobs, and when people, my thing with minimum wage is, hey, a lot of it is people aren't educationally prepared to do anything else. Right? We had that problem when we were at Sound Circle, right? You look at a lot of the restaurants that were in the city, the education system around that area was not that great. And so folks were struggling, right? And you can take two tacks with this. One, you can walk into that establishment and goof on somebody because they're unprepared to work a cash register, right? When we say that today, they're unprepared to work a computer, right? Because that's really what we're asking them to do. They're unprepared to do that. And they've got limited life skills. So you can either make fun of that, or you can celebrate the fact that we've got them on a path somewhere, right? My personal opinion is I think the universal basic income is a death nail to society because it removes a lot of incentive for greatness, however you define that, right? Like those folks that are making 30, 40, 50 grand at some schools in the humanities department of the doctorate, they made a conscious effort to do that. And obviously to do that and stay with that and put up with some of the financial hardships, they love what they're doing, right? Because I don't think if you can go get a doctorate, get any terminal degree, right? And the level of effort that takes, that all the things that we stipulate a lot of times about people that they work in, people that look down on the service industry. And I personally think, having been a bartender and worked behind a food counter growing up, that if you don't do that, you're not setting yourself up to be a good human, right? Mm-hmm. Because when people you move into say leadership, and people, we need servant leaders. Well, all leader, I think that servant leader is a bad hyphen because every bit of leadership needs to be about others. Because if you're not doing that, you're not getting it done the right way. And so, how can you possibly move into that position of leadership and along the way accept greater responsibility if you don't start out at the bottom? I think that was the intent of the minimum wage. It was never meant to be, hey, you're locked in here for the rest of your life. It was like, hey, we're taking advantage of largely at the point of attack when this happened was young folks and or folks that have some sort of disability, right? I mean, and that's, you look at a lot of these, and then so how do we say, hey, you're as an employer, like the evil employer, you're not getting away with this for free, but you're going to pay these people something. I personally think we start pushing a mandatory minimum wage, and all we're going to do, jumping back into this life in tech, is figure out how to automate that process more quickly, because they're going to say, well, hey, I've got X amount of bucket. Here's my percentage. I'm going to spend 60% this year. Let's random number. I'm going to spend 60% on labor. Well, great. I can do that at $10 an hour, $8 an hour, $15 an hour. You tell me how to do it, and I'll tell you the number of people.
Right.
And what are we not doing? We're not jumping people into the labor pool early when they're 15, 16 years old, to give them basic experience to go, hey, this is work. This is what work looks like. And I think that's hugely important to get people off on the right foot for their life.
Yeah, well, we have this. It seems to me that we have this weird part of our culture where we don't want people to get a free ride, whether that's homelessness, whether it's welfare, whether it's trust funds, whatever, right? But at the same time, we shit on like low wage, entry level jobs, and it's this weird dichotomy. Yeah. With tipping, what I'm interested in exploring is somehow we figured out this loophole in this minimum wage, universal basic income, however you construe that, right? We figured out this loophole as a society where we can socialize the wage, because that's what employers are doing with tip, right? So if I'm a waitress and I'm making $3 an hour, that's legally allowed under the premise that I'm going to make it up on tips, which is right. I mean,
right.
Which is not being paid directly by the employer, even though you could argue that the wage is indirectly paid by the consumer anyway. But it's this weird little like exception that I don't know that I quite understand. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't have a problem with it, as Dan was saying. I don't think we ought to not tip. That's not my point. But my point is, like, how do we get this little niche in society where this is how it works, whereas everywhere else it doesn't work that way?
And it's funny because it's largely an American custom. I mean, there's some other like you go to Europe, you go most other places, nobody tips. And I use France as an example. France, like when you go to, one of the things that drives Westerners, Americans in particular, nuts when they go to a country like France, for example, is because of their labor laws, they're chronically understaffed, because they have to take ownership of that employee for, I think, a year or two. And so even they can't do surge, right? If there's a big conference somewhere, they can't, like in Cannes, they can't surge anybody, right? Or when the World Cup shows up. And so people end up waiting around a long time, right? But they're not tipped, right? And they have the income that they make, and it's based on whatever metric they use. I think there's like one schism where I don't know if this exists today. I can't imagine it did. But when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, and I can't believe people fell for this, is if you worked at the movie theater, there was something, because they were service quasi entertainment thing, they could pay these people below minimum wage. But then the big cachet with that was, well, you get as many free movie tickets as you want. I can't eat free movie tickets. I can't, you know what I mean? And what am I creating a barter system where I got a stack of tickets and I'm out with local vendors? I mean, that's in the crazy part. I enjoyed bartending, right? I worked at a sub shop when I was in high school for a while, and obviously you're getting paid minimum wage or a little bit above whatever it was. And largely that was a cavalcade of teenagers, and then one or two young adults, and then the owner. Right. And it was that owner's job, who owned 5 or 6 of these things, to keep that young adult pool stocked, because you can teach anybody how to make a hamburger. Mm-hmm. Right. How do I get somebody that's maybe didn't want to go to college, maybe not traditionally engaged in learning, but has leadership skills, has management flair, right? And he understands the business, or that he or she understands the business they're in. And then you apply it to something like running a restaurant. Right. And how many times on Food Network do you see, hey, I started out in the kitchen somewhere and now he's owning 3 restaurants and things like that, right? Because it's not that traditional brick and mortar classroom learning. It's, experiential learning. And so if we go back and say, hey, we're gonna fix this, right? And when I say fix, I always use in the government air quotes fix. We're gonna fix this. We're gonna demand that employers put X wage across this, right? And we do it because we look at the bottom end, and we look at the people that can't defend themselves, and we want to apply it across everything, because it's very hard to pick and choose, right? It's very hard to say, okay, where's the cutoff at, right? And who doesn't get? It's like the thing with special needs kids, and not when I say special, the kids who just need some extra help and get tutoring and stuff. There's a cutoff. Like, hey, your kid didn't score low enough. Well, wait a second, they still need help.
Right.
So where do we define what the system pays for, and what people in the case of education, parents have to jump in and say, hey, okay, we're going to go get a tutor, get my kid after school, and we're going to take him and make him better. I think it applies across everything. I mean, I remember back in '84, there was a big restaurant outside of Boston, had like a 80-some foot neon cactus, and it was called the Hilltop Steakhouse. And people are like, I couldn't find it. Okay, you're legally blind, right?
Yeah.
It's an 80-foot neon cactus, and it was packed. And even outside in the wintertime, they had a bar that was like a facade that opened up from where people would stand underneath to wait to get in. And there was a bartender there, and most people got one drink, right, when they walk past, right? And you're waiting to get in. You're not sitting there powerhouse and on your way into the restaurant. And I can remember back in '84, because I was bartending back then. Somebody knew that guy, and that guy made like 80 grand in tips in 1984, one drink at a time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he was out there when it was cold, it was hot, postal, rain, snow, shine, shan't stop me from my appointed rounds. But what, young guy, what are we learning in the tipping culture, right? I mean, do we say that today the tipping culture is about keeping servers honest, keeping them nice, right? So they don't just come and fling the food across your plate, right? I don't think so. I think some people are dedicated to that, and that's a craft. Right? I think Dan brought up a great point. You go out certain places. I'm going to go because I know I might have a favorite server that I want to sit in their section or things like that. But I guarantee you, management has trained everybody to be respectful and really give you a great experience. Some people don't appreciate it because they're not foodies. They don't like wine. It's like it's not their thing. But if you go out and that's part of like when you say I'm going to spend my discretionary income on something that I enjoy that, right? Mm-hmm. And I enjoy somebody, and I'll give a kick-ass tip. I'm not a habitual under-tipper anyway because I was in the service industry, so I understand the backside of that, and that a lot of the problems that occur are not the fault of the person that you're interacting with.
Right? Yeah, totally.
That 20%, let's say you give them. Some of that's got to go to the bar staff. Some of that goes to the bar back. Some of that goes to the table, the food runners, and everything like that. And so, what you give them at the point of attack when you sign your check goes across the entire restaurant. I think what your question is, and what mine would be, is like, what responsibility does the owner of that place have? What I think they're going to tell you is what I think Dan's prepared to say is, hey, look, they've got a certain amount of dollars to spend, and they can employ more people if you have a good culture of tipping, right? And everybody's in on how that functions within the restaurant. Now they can employ more people. They can potentially add another restaurant, right? And I think I think it's because of like big Fortune 50 companies where people go, wow, the CEO is making X billion of dollars or millions of dollars a year, and the lowest level employee is not making nearly that, and they do it in a percentage against the lowest, right? But when you look at small to medium business, which a lot of restaurants are, especially some of the best ones, I think, how is the tipping culture affecting that owner's ability to go and open another restaurant and employ more people?
That's true. I mean, I know as we're starting this off with tipping, it's in a way we have been crowdsourcing how we pay for things that we enjoy. And, we have this functionality, so to speak, when it comes to social media, how well things are liked, how popular you are. Well, in many ways, that is tipping through a, so to speak, digital currency. And I don't mean like a Bitcoin. It's, people are paying for those promoters if you have X amount of followers and you're an influencer and stuff like that. Well, it's the same thing with tipping. It's just started off way before any of this internet aspect happened. When you had a good server and you had a good experience, you are in essence saying, not just to that owner and establishment, but I'm going to spend my dollars to not only be here, but also I'm showing my gratitude because I got good service, and then I'm willing to say thanks. In many ways, it's not just there. Someone when I go to certain hotels and the person, the bellhop, actually, greets me right at the door, says, "Please let me take your bags up to your room." Those things I appreciate. And, that person, I can tip because I appreciate it. But I don't think that there's an aspect where that is in the same type of argument of we talk about like with minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
Minimum wage is meant, to me, it's the starting point. This aspect of people talking about this huge gap in all these millionaires and billionaires and why they should be taxed more and stuff like that. And I go, you know what? How about screw you? I got $300,000 in student loans. No one's paying that. I'm making an investment in myself because I don't want to work for the wage that I have today. I'm investing to see where I need to be 10 years from now. And minimum wage, I mean, and I didn't go to school traditionally. I didn't go back to school till I was 25, 26 years old. I actually went to work at a Wendy's because they started off managers at like $20,000 a year. So I'm like, I'll go do that right now.
I'm in.
Figure out.
Yeah.
So,
that's another interesting thing. I mean, because we can all agree as reasonable adults that it would be very bad for society to not have some kind of safety net to at least help people get on their feet, either if they're traditional entry level or something bad happens, right? I mean, I think
even welfare, right? Or even government-led assistance, right?
It makes sense to not let your citizens get totally fucked.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's a general consensus among most reasonable adults, okay? And yet Dan raised an interesting point, which to me is part of this I think part of the same psychology here. And I mean that informally. And yet we don't enforce any type of ceiling. So we'll guarantee that you can at least get started, but we're not going to call let's say the top 1% to do that. We're going to crowdsource it across essentially the middle, which is traditionally the biggest part of the population. Why is that? Because you brought it up, Dan. Why not have a flat tax after a certain amount at the top?
I don't have a problem with flat tax all the way around. I mean, I think.
Yeah, I don't either, but especially at the top. I mean, because I think it's a fair question to ask. The answer isn't obvious to me, but I think it's a fair question to ask. How much is too much? Is there too much?
In terms of what you make or in terms of what you pay in taxes?
What you make.
I don't think there should be a limit on what anyone could strive for, because here's the one individual, right? I'm one individual. I am paying per square foot in my home the same amount of electricity, the same amount of water and infrastructure that you are as if you are in a 300 square foot home. We're paying proportion in terms of our utility needs and infrastructure needs, which are largely subsidized, by the government as well. I'm paying the same amount for milk. I'm paying the same amount for my apples and anything along those lines. We're all paying the same amount. So why is it that the person that worked in one way or another, more efficiently, harder, whatever, to get where they are, why should they pay more in taxes just because they were more successful when each of us are taking the same amount from the government as the person to the left and the person to the right?
Well, I think the traditional counter-argument, and it's not mine necessarily, is that exactly for what you just said, because you've been successful.
We all have an opportunity to go to the library. I mean, I'm out here, no one's helped me. No one's, helped either of you in such a speak in terms of we had to put in the work. I've paid for all of my education. So there was no, so to speak, grant money. There was no scholarships. There was no parents helping me out or grandparents. I've done it all on my own. So whatever I get, it's been due to my hard work. Everyone can get to a point to where if they choose to be the best that they absolutely can in their chosen profession, you can make a decent wage. Some of it may happen to be luck, but just because I have been more successful than the other person doesn't mean I'm taking more in terms of the benefits that are there, because we're all paying a tax. And in some ways you could say, since I'm in a higher tax bracket, I am paying more. I think tax brackets, 37% or whatever it is. It's a lot of money, and what that doesn't take into account are all that I don't get to deduct my student loans from any of that.
Right. Right. So here's the kicker question then, because I think largely to agree with you. Okay. Then why tip?
Because
But you see, like there's a weird psychology there, right?
well,
And we all have it. I'm not picking on you. I have it too. It's just this weird thing with society where we want to help the low end. We don't want to cap the top in any way, shape, or form. And I'm not disagreeing. And yet we have this thing where we want to tip. So why do we tip?
Well, but where I'm going and spending my money is not at a low end place. Like I'm not tipping someone at McDonald's.
Yeah, but
they're also making they're the pointy end of the spear.
Yeah.
For a universal minimum wage.
Yeah, and they
sure.
Because they're at the, but again, they're at the, hey, you're in, you're out, right? You almost don't need customer interaction. And in fact, when you see some industrious franchisees of multiple restaurants, so, okay, you want a $15 minimum wage? Here, I'm going to go out and spend $2,000 on a point of sale kiosk, and then I'll get rid of 3 kids and just have one back there to chuck the bag across the counter at you.
Yep.
Right.
And it's let's look at it like this. We as a nation, not a society, as a nation. When I say nation, I mean government, right? Because that's really where everybody's grabbing and pulling. Like everybody's trying to pull their lever of government to get the outcome they want. If you look at, let's just start with the people at the very bottom, right? The people that don't have a job, right? And I'm not going to talk about like homelessness, and because that's largely a mental health problem, and that's a whole different show about what we are or not willing to do to help with mental health in this in the country. It's easier in San Francisco to go by with a truck and pick homeless people up in neighborhoods that people don't want to see homeless people and deposit them somewhere else than it is to deal with mental health. And so that's what we do, right? Whole different show. The system is set up right now, unless something, don't at me, but unless something changed dramatically in the last few weeks, right? Where if I'm on some sort of subsistence, right? And let's say that my benefit, I'm allowed $400 a week. That usually comes with Medicaid and a bunch of other ancillary benefits to basically make sure that you have some minimum tier of health, right? If I go out and get a job that pays me $10 an hour, right? Or a little bit less than that. So let me change the argument. So it's like 600, and I go out and I make 400. I don't get the other 200 and keep my subsistence with medicine and everything else. I lose my entire benefit, right? So if you want to help people, say you're here. Yes, we want to help those people in society that can't help themselves or fall on hard times and need a leg up, so to speak. But how we do it doesn't promote people getting off the city, because you're saying, hey, I want you to go and move. Well, okay, if we agree that $15 is too much or whatever the number is, because it forces employers to do things like cut the amount of people they can hire. Well, as a nation, let's pay them 20% plus the other benefit and push them in further into the arena. And as they make more, that drops off. And the all or nothing nature at the bottom really tends to skew some of that. And it also brings out the worst in humanity. And it's usually never wealthy people. It's the middle class people that feel they're funding all that. And some of it is basically like, go get a calculator, and you're really not, right? But it's angst at where we spend our money, right? And that culture of, well, I'm trying harder than you, right? And that's the crazy part about it. But when you get back at it, with all the taxes we pay, with all the fees, right? I mean, we pay X amount in taxes, but we pay an enormous amount of fees, right? Fees for your car, fees for your thing. Hey, all the taxes for gas are supposed to go to what? When you buy
infrastructure, right?
Right. Well, then why are the roads falling apart? Because nobody stopped buying gas.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not the act of taxation. It's what we allow to happen on the back end.
Mhm.
right? It becomes a political issue. And hey, I mean, I had a U.S. senator one time. He's like, hey, when I was still on active duty, he's like, what can we do for you guys? I'm like, pay us more, right? And I mean, I've dealt with a lot of politicians over the years, especially with issues like that. The only one that didn't lie to me. He said, hey, I'd really like to do it, but I can't. I'm like, why not? He's like, because every dollar I spend doing this is a dollar I can't put in the district for building a ship, for building an airplane, for doing something to keep people at work, right? Now, largely that's about keeping votes. Let's not fool ourselves, right? But
Sure.
it is, I mean, think about that. It's like, hey, you've got a job, you can consider yourself underpaid and everybody wants to get paid more, but you're not poor, right? You have healthcare, you have all these things, you have a disposable income, you own a home and all these things. What I'm saying is I'm going to keep that money in the district because I want to make sure that my district has the maximum employment possible. Is that a bad thing? I mean, is the fact that he gets something out of that, he gets to stay in office, is that bad? Or is he doing what he was elected to do?
I would argue he's doing his job.
Right. But where do we change that? It's the whole healthcare argument, right? Back in 2007, 2008, one of the big reasons that was given was 45 million people that are unemployed or that don't have healthcare, right? I'm less worried about those folks because those folks will get some sort of, have been getting some level of government assistance. I'm worried about a system where the costs are spiraling out of control, and then the middle class, that becomes a much greater portion of their income pie, right? Their revenue pie and what they can spend, right? And now I'm being very simplistic in this, but do you think there is one American with employer contribution and personal contribution and what they pay in copays and everything like that spends $1 million a year
On health.
on healthcare?
Oh man, if
a person
for insurance, right? Like I've got a thing. Do you think that anybody in that system pays $1 million a year? No, they don't, right? So we spent $600 million trying to get the front and back end system to manage all the people, and the thing didn't work. Here's TK's plan. We have 370 million men, women, and children in this country. Give the health insurance industry $1 million a person per year and have a sliding scale over time, but give them $1 million a year in premiums and say, figure it out. We demand platinum healthcare because under the model you're at now, you don't collect anywhere near that and you are rolling in dough.
Right.
Where they've got people at these big healthcare companies, Blue Cross, Blue, and all guys, their only function is to make sure they spend every dime.
They're supposed to be nonprofit in a way.
But exactly. But
the health insurance companies are for profit.
Exactly. But and it's state run, and people, all the things that people go apoplectic about with insurance is, and I, like simple math guy, right? It's arithmetic to me. You have a system where we advocated for a new system. We put another layer of government bureaucracy on it. And then we said, hey, by the way, it has to be cheaper. How does that work? And we exempted, the minute you exempted a large portion of big companies, you said that the product wasn't worth having.
Right.
And so now it becomes an us against them, right? And that that carries over from, because healthcare, I think it's hugely important to people, right? It should be, right? Being able to, we should be the most, in a lot of ways, are the most medically advanced society on planet Earth, and we shoulder the load from a research dollar for a lot of nations, right? How do we make that more efficient, right?
Yeah, well, it's almost identical to the food problem, right?
Right.
As I understand the science of it, the world doesn't have a food shortage problem. The world has a food distribution problem.
Correct. Right, and that goes. We talked about this before. I was saying, people, when the uber wealthy, right, the ones that feel they have to give money away because it just doesn't look right for them to have that much money, right? Everybody wants the sexy problem, right? They want to fix the sexy problem, right? And it's like I said, any problem, somebody gets to sleep with the princess and somebody has to mess with the dragon. Right?
Yeah.
The dragon for distribution of most everything, for example, in Africa, is infrastructure. It's poor road system, poor water delivery. Once you get away from the edges of the continent, And who wants to go and build roads? Right? You know, and one of the big problems now is when they go out, and there's more than one organization that goes to put deep core wells in sub-Saharan Africa to bring water. Because they think in minutes, not decades, the first thing they do is they go to the well and tear it apart and sell everything for scrap.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you look at something so simple as, what's the biggest problem with disease in Africa? And how does it spread? It's spread being foodborne. And everybody's donating all these billions of dollars to try to think. Zappos said, why don't we just give them shoes?
Yeah.
Right? And we've magically cut down on this problem, right? I think especially when you start talking about in the US, we're crowdsourcing opinion, right? We have elected officials. We don't teach our kids how to get in contact with them and why we have the ability to reach out to them and say, hey, what you're doing isn't inconsistent with what we elected you to do. And now it becomes that Twitter, cancel me war. Oh, that guy doesn't want to do this. That's not what I'm saying. I want people to be taken care of. We have to do it better because there's not an endless resource of cash, and you can't tax people into prosperity, right? It doesn't work.
No, you're right. You're right.
And the argument, like the Elizabeth Warren argument, where she's going to basically wants to tax billionaires out of existence, that's envy, right? It's envy and it's fear and anger, right? It drives most bad behavior in life. And we look at that, and how many times do people at the bottom get to see that repetitive nature and everything that's driven at them in regards to who they vote for, what they do, what they buy? How much of it is driven to them that, hey, somebody else put you in this position and I'm here to take care of you? We've been talking that for 50, 60 years now that I've been on the planet, and we've not changed a thing, have we?
Well, see, and that's kind of where I was going with this. Tell me what you guys think about this. This is the way, at least right now, it's obvious to me why this works the way it works. People want to tax the ultra wealthy because of what you said. They're envious that they're ultra wealthy, and they're upset that they didn't get theirs too in the same way. And it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense to me because it's ignorant of what the core problem is.
Right.
And the core problem is basic needs aren't being met across the board, across a certain social strata in the population, right? And that's mainly health, mental health, and education. Okay? So, I mean, if you look at the 2 to 3 biggest predictors of future success for a kid are their parents' income and their parents' education level. The third being their own IQ. But nonetheless, okay, so you can break things down to those basic levels, and when those needs aren't being met, because that social strata is lagging, it's an anchor to the rest of society, right? And at the same time, we have this issue where we started with this. We have this issue where we bemoan minimum wage. Like, well, why does certain people need to make a certain amount of money? Because if they don't have any income whatsoever, they get completely screwed out of society, which is equally bad. And so we figured that part out. And so to me, it seems that we allowed this tipping culture to develop within our society because it allows us to have more of this one-on-one engagement with those in our community where, right, okay, so taxing the wealthy won't work because, first of all, you can't redistribute that wealth effectively. We know that because you can't even pass out fucking rice. If you can't pass out rice, you ain't passing out dollars correctly, okay? And it's ignorant of the problem. The dollar ain't going to help somebody immediately become better educated. And because it's divorced from me giving you that 20% tip, there's no emotional connection either. Whereas when we go to our favorite restaurant to sit with our favorite waitress or waiter and we give them that 20% and they know it's coming from us, I think we're creating a bond, if you will, within a tribe that I think psychologically, even subconsciously, we think is going to help that person want to be better. That's my take on it.
I don't know that I'm necessarily wanting that person to be better. They have to, they have to choose it for themselves. I'm happy to be tipping because I'm appreciative of the service that I got, and therefore I'm paying for what I have. If that person leaves that restaurant, I don't know that I'm going to go try and find that waiter or waitress at some other restaurant because I also happen to go there because of the food. I might find another favorite waiter or waitress at that particular establishment. But getting back to the kind of where I see at least partial solutions, which is what I think a lot of what because a partial solution exists, we tend to choose to not want to accept it because you can't have a full solution in anything. So to me, I don't understand why we have kids that are, graduating high school. Why does the government not more either advertise or offer more availability to where they're going to essentially become in service to the government, the military, a Red Cross, that for X amount of years, you're going to work for government, military, Red Cross, whatever, and we're going to go send you to a state school and you're going to get trained in something. And whether or not that be electrician or whether or not that's going to be, you're going to be a mathematician or whatever. We do it in some cases, like if you go to the National Guard, you get to go to college up front and then you commit, to a total of 6 years, or sometimes with a GI Bill. But where is this more being used? We don't want people to be working on minimum wage, but we're not putting enough effort into establishing skills that are needed, that are going to make it to where you're not on minimum wage.
But I think that goes back to we've talked about before. I think in society, parents and everything like that, and most parents, I think, would agree that education, however you define that, education is the key to success, right? At some point, right? We have more than a little bit of evidence that suggests that leads to a higher, higher financial outcome, right? But I also think that, and it's different around here, with the shipbuilding industries and everything, there's a lot of trades that there are a lot of gray hairs there now, right? Because young folks are not going into the trades as much as they are. And when you can make, 80%, $80,000, $100,000 welding now, it tells you, what the market will bear, right? I think in the macro, one of the problems we have with taking care of people in this country now is with the polar nature of our politics. I truly believe this at a high political level, not at the individual person, but as a nation level now. To a certain extent, there's a good number of politicians that would rather see the system fail, see people suffer, is the right way to say this, if it wasn't their idea and they didn't implement it.
Yeah, sure.
Right? And that's the sad part, right? And it's, I have to be the savior of your soul, right? And that to me is the, even as recently as the mid 90s, Clinton and Newt Gingrich got together and said, hey, right now the economy is going in the pooper, and if we don't get together and figure this out, and they figured it out, right? And if you hear Clinton speak, he'll be like, hey, look what I did. Well, that's the benefit of being the president, right? When it goes right, you get all the credit. The other side benefit is when it goes wrong, you get all the credit, right? But if you hear Newt Gingrich speak in public and he's not incorrect, I saw a thing where he was at some college and somebody was saying, well, president did this, president did that. And it was ignorance of how the system works. And he's like, hey, I don't know if you understand all this, but none of this happens unless we make laws, right?
Right.
And we've placed this, it's actually just misplaced primacy in the executive branch of government in that case, right? Because you want to change, you want to fix potholes, you want to basically do better, like with day-to-day society in America. Pick the Congress you want, right? If you're happy with what we have now, then you're going to keep getting the same results we have, because we largely have had the same people as our representatives, right? Because they're not our leaders, as our representatives for the past 30 years. And this isn't a Republican Democrat thing. This is opposite sides of the same coin shouting at a bunch of people that disagree with each other, right? If you want a different foreign policy, go get yourself a new senator or congressman, right? And the only power the president really has had is the bully pulpit of the presidency and how they can articulate that. And at certain times, it's been done spectacularly well to bring about change, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it was, to end society's problems, fix things, or just call attention to the fact that, hey, we're not doing the right thing. Let's all figure this out. We don't do that anymore, right? And I think, some of this is snowballed because we always say, well, hey, more money will help. And once you've sucked dry a good, how many people say, hey, I can keep paying more, right? Because at some point you're like, hey, I can give more money to the government, or I can't send my kid to the school I want to send them to, right? In certain cases, right? Or I can go buy the medicine that I want to buy, right? Somebody needs to show me how giving a healthcare company $1 million a year for every man, woman, and child in the U.S. isn't going to work when mathematically we don't pay that in premiums in any way, shape, or form, right? It's a simple statistics problem, right? In my mind, right?
It is, and
we're not interested in solving that because that's a radical change. And if we say we're willing to say, hey, let's go, in small pockets, well, universal basic income, really? Let's see how quickly that works out. I want you to go give everybody an A in the class next semester, whether they do any work or not, right? Or norm it and say, well, all you people that got Fs, the average grade in the class was a 2.7.
All right, so here's a little funny anecdote for you, real quick on that.
How long before nobody tries?
Yeah, exactly. You have a fair point. Check this out. I had an experience once upon a time when I was teaching at a particular school, not High Point, where through entirely my fault, it was a brand new course. I did not make it rigorous enough. And so all the students earned A's. Okay? Within 10 minutes of turning in those grades, I got a phone call asking me to explain it. Well, my explanation is I didn't make the course hard enough, so it's on me. Fair enough. It's well understood that it takes 2-3 times to teach the same course, especially when it's brand new.
Before you norm it out?
Before you can tweak it the right way with rigor. Okay, so check this out. You know what the solution was? The suggested solution? If you're going to do that, make sure everybody gets C's. You can just straight up give it to them. Don't even worry about it. Just give them C's because it looks good in the stats. Right? Because they're right in the middle of the bell curve. If you give everybody an even, let's say 75%, they're dead drop middle in the normal data distribution. That wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
And it was like, and the way it was said to me, it was.
That's CYA.
It was like I was it was like I was the idiot for not thinking about it. Like, just give them C's, dude. It's okay. Like, what?
That's CYA at its finest right there.
Oh yeah, dude.
That
Totally.
is completely, because here's the thing. You did the right thing by going, hey, no, it's not. It's my bad.
Yeah, completely.
And they understood it because they understood the nature of how education works and how you get to the point where you're challenging a student enough to learn something and to grow, but not kicking them in the junk to where they lose interest in what's going on.
Good. That would be great. All those people that have to get tuition reimbursement, you give them all C's, none of them have gotten reimbursed.
That's right.
Oh yeah,
That's right.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
Or the person that was going to be summa cum laude.
Yeah, now it's no lod.
C.
Now he's got no lods. He's done with lods. He's lodless. This is like,
So therefore, I would have gone like, you know what? You're right. I'm going to go back and change the grade to all C's. Just so I can see people's minds explode.
And from a leadership perspective, the absolute best thing you could have done, Jason, was walk in and go, be thankful you guys are the first class because I'm trying to figure this out and it's going to be harder in subsequent classes. Because if I'm looking around for a class and I want to help, I want some sort of lodness at the end of it. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go take Professor Jason's class because everybody there gets an A. You show up the next time and it's like, hey, wait a second, that wasn't what I wanted.
Yeah. Oh man, but you're right though. It's interesting because I see things like, we all use Twitter to varying degrees, and as an idea, as a technology, it ought to have.
I'm a leftist apologist now, but
Say what?
Someone told me I'm a leftist apologist.
I knew that.
I don't know, man. If it makes you feel better, we'll balance it out. Like at Thanksgiving dinner, when I was talking about you, I referred to you as my conservative gun nut friend. I didn't because I didn't talk to anybody. Once again this year, I got away with my hip flask of scotch, and I just silently drank the afternoon away.
Hey, you were good.
Well, by the way, this is a big tangent. This is the beauty of living where I live now, because when I had enough and I ran out of scotch, I just got up and walked home because it's across the field. Like, I'm completely responsible.
That's
anyway,
awesome.
What's interesting to me about a technology when we talk about like solutions to these types of issues is something like Twitter ought to have the capacity to crowdsource solutions at a very rapid pace. Okay. And yet it doesn't, because of the way the algorithms are configured. What it does is it crowdsources outrage, because there's this weird thing where if you think about what most people click on, they click on things that make them rage, right? And so that's what the algorithm sees as being selected. And the more things are selected, they rise to the top and all the other stuff goes to the bottom, right? That's why I'll tell you right now, for anybody that's watching this in the near future, one of the best things I ever did to make Twitter actually usable for me and not be this source of manufactured consent and rage is I wrote my own interface to it. And that way I pull what I want. I'm not beholden to their algorithms anymore. I can just read the news as I want to.
If you want it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll applaud Twitter for having an API, which Facebook doesn't anymore. After the Cambridge Analytica scandal, they closed that down real fast. There's no more API at all.
So where I was going, so TK, or both of your opinions, but TK, you have probably more experience with this. So the discussion was about Ambassador Rice being on the board of Netflix versus Hunter Biden being on that. And I'm like, look, I don't know Hunter Biden's credentials at all, but Ambassador Rice she worked for McKinsey as a management consultant. She has a PhD in international policy and was awarded by I can't remember which place. People have this belief that board members they have to know that industry or something along those lines. And I go, that's simply, to me, just not true. They have to be someone that should have some intelligence. If they're a specialist, maybe they're a specialist in policy, organizational management, or anything. Maybe they're the finance specialists. They just need to be able to call out what's going on. I'm like, look, Ambassador Rice, to me, I could care less about her politics. I'd have her on my board in a minute. She's a very intelligent lady. And this guy went and called me a leftist apologist for saying that. I'm going, he goes, how many boards have you been reporting to? I'm like, dude, I've been doing this for years. It's like, well, public companies, private companies, and now a nonprofit. And he's like, how many have you done? None. I thought so. I'm like, well, clearly, dude, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. But, board members are not some special, privilege. Yeah, you get paid sometimes, depending on, where they're at. But you don't have to be some great person just to be on a board. Maybe you are on the board for political motivation, but that doesn't matter.
I think if you're gonna talk, especially bigger companies where they've got probably double-digit board members. Yeah. Right? It's one thing if you have a small company, you got 3 or 4 people. It's largely the investors, and you're hoping that there's enough variety of opinion to really help you as a leader grow the business. I mean, that's the thing. But you take that to the macro, right? Some of it is about access, right? What access does that board member give you to another segment of the market that you may not have had, right? Some of it is political. Hey, if we've got, and it's not necessarily the bad portion of, having political access. Some of it is, hey, you understand how the system works. We want this outcome. How can we make it happen? And sometimes the answer is, that's not the outcome you really want. You want to do this. And so when you look at a board and you look at life, right? Here's the bigger problem. What that guy was arguing for is that everybody on that board should think the same way. Yeah. Right? What I'm advocating for is put people in the middle of the room that understand the value of dissent, right? I don't mean being an abject asshole every time somebody says, hey, the sun's coming up in the east today. No, I really think it's coming up in the west. You're just facing the wrong way, right? Okay, you sit down. Right? I'm just, it's like, you just want to argue for the sake of arguing. But that variety of thought, right? And going, hey, I'm generally directionally correct in where I'm going. What I want to do is to do this. How do I do that? If I do it in the echo chamber of hiring everybody that thinks like me, or getting a board of everybody that's just going to vote with me all the time, I'm doing myself a disservice. I'm either doing the investors, shareholders, but probably most importantly, the employees a disservice, because I'm not considering counsel that is opposed or divergent from my own thought pattern. And I think that's the I mean, how many years has Al Gore been on Apple's board?
Yeah. Right.
And look, Bob Iger just left Apple's board because he's like, well, I guess we're going to do this Disney Plus thing now, and we're going to be competing. I can't do that, right? But when you talk about, and that goes from, at some point, the advice that Apple got from Dr. Dre and building, when they built Beats Music, right, and then acquiring that, and the people that they brought in along the way, right? And think about this: when companies acquire other assets, what are they a lot of times wanting to acquire? They want to acquire that executive team.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They want to put that CEO on the board. They might want to give him a role where he's a big thought process and thought guy. Now, if that's me, if I'm that CEO that's acquiring that company, I hope that guy has an opinion about a lot of things that, while somewhat congruous, is different, or at least causes me to think differently about the way I want to solve problems, right? And so many times we want to bring people in. It's that IBM mentality: blue suit, white shirt, blue or red tie, depending on what day of the week it is, right? And you want to create a culture, right? Well, there's creating a culture of compliance, and there's creating a culture of growth, right? And that culture of growth is not just financially, right? It's intellectually, it's spiritually, and it's diversity of thought. And I think that's hugely important. I think one of the things we lack now is in public policy, kind of to get these problems we were talking about earlier. Like, how do we take the bottom and get them up to where they can not only take care of themselves, but be productive, and then turn around and say, hey, I want to express gratitude for how I was helped, and I want to help others. How do we do that, but with this insanely large bureaucracy, right? I mean, we can't even do the VA right? Yeah. And you're saying, hey, we're going to spend trillions of dollars to go and have people defend this nation, fight wars, and I'm not, this isn't a political thing, but everybody has their own divergent opinion about when we send people overseas, service members, what that happens. And for whatever reason, when people volunteer and they do this, and I think, Dan, when you start talking about national service, one of the highlights, you can compare the 70s, certainly the end of conscription or the draft, to what became a professionalized force of the 80s and now and today, is the quality of service member you got, right? Because every one of them is a volunteer. We just happen to be able to find enough that we don't have to do that, right? I totally agree with you that service to others is hugely important, right? And we don't place enough value on that in society. And frankly, now, most folks are not enticed into the Navy or the Air Force or the Marines or the Army. The Marines are a little bit different, but they're enticed through education, through opportunity to grow and serve your nation, right? It's hey, you're going to come in, you're going to learn how to be an air traffic controller, you're going to learn how to work on computers, you're going to learn how to work on nuclear reactors. All of those skills are going to help you when you grow. And in the military, the Navy in particular, has always been at the forefront of workplace education, right? And when we talk about workplace education, we're talking about getting people all the certs to do everything for IT, and then providing them tuition assistance at night to go finish their degrees. Right? How do we take that and apply that out in the civilian world?
Yeah.
Right? Those are I think, Morgan, our friend Morgan, he has his undergrad is in workforce education. Right. And there's a robust program within, and I'm sure it's in every service. I can only speak about the Navy because that's where I was at.
When you see him, let him know he's now my third best intern.
He's not, okay. I will. It's funny because I was talking to him a couple of days ago. By the way, he's killing it. Like Anthem Healthcare switched over from Waterfall to Agile, and he is the guy that runs all of that now. He runs all the training. He gets everybody. He's crushing it over there. Another good success story from back in the day, right?
Yeah, well, all of my interns seem to succeed.
Hard work and smarts, it's a winning combination, right? And humble tutelage from Dr. Ford. But that's I look at things.
I just call it as I see it.
But everybody, you can't. I think the adverse consequences of forcing people to volunteer. Right, because that's really what you're doing, right? And in the military, they say you were voluntold, right? And that brings about a different behavior, and it's less professional. And even I've spent some time down at the Citadel, and the Citadel is a old school, 1846 was military college of the South along with VMI, right? And has had some unbelievable graduates in enterprise and the military over the years. But unlike West Point, Annapolis, or any of the federal service academies, those folks are not required to go into service when they graduate. Okay, so you have about 20 to 30% every year end up going to some branch of the military. Most of them, after their freshman year, if they don't show up with an ROTC scholarship, have an ROTC scholarship, so it's paid for, and it's a good education, right? The Commandant of Cadets is a really good friend of mine, and he's done amazing things to change the culture from basically not having changed things from 1846 to bringing us into modern times. And one of the things that I do with them is we go down and we work on culture, right? That, get rid of the hazing, professionalize what we're looking at. But what I see, as opposed to like going to West Point, because they're all on a 9-year journey together, from the day they show up as a plebe to the day that they do their first 5 years in the Navy, that 4 years of school and then the first 5 years, they're all on a similar journey, and their path throughout college is identical. It ends with them becoming a second lieutenant or an ensign, and then serving 5 years in the military. The consequence of some folks not having to go serve, right? And if you go to the Citadel and you graduate, you're in South Carolina, you're in business, you're a made guy, right? There's always going to be somebody to look out for you, just like a lot of universities in the U.S., right? And I am not opposed to that idea at all, right? It's networking, it's relationships, it's what we talk about in business all the time. Right? If I start it when I'm 18, and as long as I'm competent, right? It's about getting your foot in the door, right? I want people to have opportunity, and I want that opportunity to get an interview. And if you're competent, I want you to get the job because you're competent, right? And for no other reason, right? And that's where, when earlier you're saying, the wealthier you are, the better opportunity you have. I think there's a break point with that. There's a point of diminishing returns, because you look at like middle class kids traditionally do the best because they have all the basics. They have a means to get to college without terribly worrying about it, and they have an example set for them of work, right? And sometimes they may be the first person to get a degree in their family, sometimes not, but their parents have usually figured out a way to say, life wanted me here, I'm here, right? Or in that thing. And so they do disproportionately well once they move through life, right? And I'm not talking out at the trust fund level, but when Jared was 16, he was like, Dad, you had your Mercedes for a couple of years. Why don't you just give me that and you get a new one? Right. And I was like, if your first automobile is a Mercedes and you're 16 years old, you're going to be a jackass for the rest of your life.
Right.
Right. Because everybody wants their kids to have better than they have, but there's also value in making your kids earn things. Right. And how you do that is sometimes constricted by what disposable income you have. Right? Sure. And it goes back to the same thing. I have friends of mine that were in the military. They had their kids when they were 19, 20, 21. All their kids are grown up and they're out of the house. And now they have this, empty nest lifestyle. Now they have the resources to go do all this stuff. But for all of us that have had kids later in life, what can I give my children now that I couldn't have when I was 23, 24 years old, where I was at? And I'm not saying one's better than the other, but how does one lifestyle or another change the outcome of the next generation? Like that's, those are, to me, that's what I think about in the big thing. It's like, hey, all of these, my buddies' kids are doing fine. They'll have great jobs. One of them is like, he's a deputy chief in a fire department. They're serving others. They're making their own money. They have homes. They're married. So they didn't turn out badly. But what could have happened if they had the opportunity that, let's say, my kids have, because I waited a lot longer to have kids.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Society, we're waiting. So generational change is in welfare families is getting older and it's staying static in welfare families.
Yeah.
And so how does that affect us transitioning away from saying, hey, we've got to get people healthy, wealthy, and wise?
Yeah. Well, I think we would agree that one of the probably the most meaningful things you can do, especially if you have kids later in life, is not giving them the Mercedes. Yeah, right. But on top of that, giving them, for lack of a better way to describe it, the laundry list of mistakes you made that got you to where you're at, right? And so you're passing on this generational knowledge that's encoded into your own personal, what I would describe as your own personal narrative. It's your life story, yeah? Okay? Right. So check this out. Here's your segue to next week, what I think would be interesting to talk about.
I need to write the topic down. Keep us on track. What we got?
Is why don't we do that in industry? What I mean by that is, so this is an interesting relationship.
I was just getting ready to say something on that. Go ahead.
All right. So right now I'm the full-time academic. You guys are the full-time industry people. And we don't have a way to extract the day-to-day narrative from you guys and give it to me so that I can pass it on to the younger generation. I have to go read a fucking book or work for you guys part-time on the summer to get, let's say, updated generational narrative so I can go back and disseminate it. It's fundamentally broken, especially with the pace at which technology is changing. So what could we do to solve that problem?
All right, next week.
Yeah, there we go.
Tune in.
I'm down.
149.
That's right.
Dun, dun, dun.
Hey, we'll get to 150 before the new year. How about that?
Yeah.
Very well then. I'm in.
All right, guys. It's always a pleasure. Happy first day of December.
It's almost your special holiday coming up. Winter solstice is coming up.
Yeah, what, the 21st? 23rd.
It's your holiday, not mine.
Yeah.
I didn't say I was a good pagan.
I can't keep up with what I'm doing next week. I can't keep up with what I'm doing next week. You expect me to understand what day winter starts? I don't know.
Right, man.
Somebody will tell me that information.
Yeah, exactly. No, right. If nothing else, it's on my calendar.
Actually, my watch will tell me probably what it is. It won't be someone. It'll be my watch that'll tell me.
That's right.
All right, guys.
All right, friends.
Have a good day, everybody. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Peace.